Hey, this is Michelle Smith from the United States Olympic gold medal winning softball team, and you're talking sports with Randy Harris.
Welcome back to Knockout Radio, everybody. Mike Straka along with Street Nat Matt and Joe Marquis. Steve on the board, producing as always. We are getting Michael Usian on the line. He is the executive producer of all the big Batman movies, going back to 1989 when he produced the first one with Michael Keaton, directed by Tim Burton. And this guy, I'll let him tell the story, but he took 15 years of his life, and he was told no, no, no by every studio in Hollywood. Like, nobody wanted to do a Batman movie. And he wanted to do a dark Batman. He wanted to do Batman the way the comics was. Michael Usian is a comic guy. I got to start with DC Comics, and he's been with them for many years. He's at San Diego Comic-Con right now. And Friday night, they're revisiting the original Batman at the San Diego Civic Center. And that's going to be a big screen thing, and it's a big event for Comic-Con. And as you guys know, especially you, Matt, you know everybody who goes to Comic-Con, they're diehard fans. So I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of Batman costumes going around.
It's a great figure. I mean, it's great for society as a whole that you have this imaginary figure that's protecting you when you leave your house, and you're always, if you're not into faith or religion, you have this imaginary person. And when, Christopher Reeves died from a horse accident, we lost Superman. So I think a lot of people never really properly mourned that they lost that protective figure. So Batman is a great replacement. Gotham City.
Batman beats anybody with enough time to prepare.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. He's got the resources, and he's a businessman by day.
And he's a ninja.
Right.
I mean, he really is.
Listen, Dark Knight, the first Dark Knight, is literally my favorite superhero movie of all time.
All right, that's great.
With Heath Ledger.
And plus you have a sidekick. For a long time, it was
not get crazy. One's with Robin. So.
Well, it was for a long time. It was Matman and Randy, and we were Batman and Robin.
Listen, I'm a big fan of everybody who played Catwoman.
Oh yeah,
Halle Berry.
Who else? We had our guest on the line.
Michelle Pfeiffer. Anyway, Michael Usian is joining us from Comic-Con San Diego. Michael, welcome to Knockout Radio. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, happy to be here, guys.
Well, before we get into Batman and Comic-Con, July, the boy who loved Batman, Michael, is the playwright of this. We call it it's autobiographical, isn't it, Michael?
It is absolutely autobiographical. It's the story of a geeky kid who grew up reading comic books, who had 30,000 comic books by the time he graduated high school, and went to the first Comic-Con ever held on the planet Earth. And in my 20s, I wound up raising some money privately. I went to the president of DC Comics and bought the movie and ancillary rights to Batman.
That's incredible.
From that moment on, I was turned down by every studio in Hollywood. They told me I was crazy and it was the worst idea they ever heard to do dark and serious Batman movies. And it took me 10 years before we got our first movie made, and the rest is history. And the play is all about that.
With all that being said, how did you, because the first Batman was the 89 Batman with Michael Keaton, right?
Yes, that's right.
How did you get actors like Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, to star in that first Batman when all this was going on behind the scenes just to get the movie made?
Two magical words. In 1986, Tim Burton. Here was a kid who was an animator from Disney, he had done Frankenweenie, and I met with him. We had 3 lunches together. I indoctrinated him into the world of the serious and darker Batman, gave him all the comic books that really focused on that. And by the end of the 3rd lunch, I knew this was the guy who could make it all happen, and he did. And I have to say one thing. Tim Burton's genius. He had what I always call the big idea. And he said, if we are going to do the world's first ever dark and serious comic book superhero movie, this movie cannot be about Batman. It has to be about Bruce Wayne. And that, folks, was the game changer. That changed everything.
Incredible. You're out in San Diego Comic-Con, which is the big daddy of all the comic conventions around the country. And I know you personally. You're like a nice, quiet, humble person. You don't really crave the spotlight. But when you go to those places, you're a rock star, aren't you?
You know what? I'm a fanboy. They all know I'm a fanboy. I'm not a Hollywood suit who comes out and reads something someone else wrote for me. and they know I'm one of them. And what this has been about since the first Comic-Con, by the way, this is my 59th annual Comic-Con.
Wow.
Between San Diego and New York. There's only 3 of us who have been to every one since the beginning. But when I'm there, it's a community. We have all kind of found our community, and ultimately the geeks have inherited the earth.
I know one of your panels this week at Comic-Con is going to be a panel about Stan Lee. Now, you worked with Stan Lee. What was it like? And as a kid, like you said, with 300 comic books, 500 comic books before you graduated high school, that must have been a pivotal moment in your life and in your career.
Stan Lee started out as my idol. He became my mentor. He became my friend. We then worked together creatively. And ultimately, my son and I were 2 of the producers of his memorial at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. Stan was incredible for me. There is so much he imparted to me as a mentor in terms of graphic storytelling, but also the responsibility we all have. And part of that is when we make these comic book movies or TV or animation, it's not only about the integrity of the characters and staying true to the characters where we can. It is also about honoring the creators, many of whom during their lifetimes were denigrated and cast aside by society, who in those days looked down their noses at comic books. And that's part of what we have to do. And that's why I love when I see Bill Finger's name appearing on movies and TV. I really feel like we've all accomplished something very important.
What's the panel like? That you're on 2 different panels this week at Comic-Con. What's the second one that you're on?
85 years of Batman. Right now we are celebrating the 35th anniversary of our first Batman movie, as well as the 85th anniversary of Batman.
Wow.
And on Friday night at the Civic Theater in San Diego, the 1989 movie's back up on the big screen with a huge symphony orchestra on stage playing the score to the movie. It is an electrifying experience. And then we have a couple of bat parties on Saturday, and we're just going to be celebrating the character, his creators, and all the great artists, writers, editors, who over the years have made Batman strong and continuing beyond new generations.
As executive producer, how involved do you get? I mean, I know Mally Finn was the casting director of a lot of them, including I think Tim Burton and with Joel Schumacher. And I think since she's passed, there's a couple other casting directors involved now. But as an EP, do you get a say? What kind of influence do you get over the film, or are you just the guy that you bring it in and then Tim Burton takes over?
Well, it's changed over the years for sure, and you got to remember in the movie industry, the money talks. Money ultimately has the ultimate say, unless you're Steven Spielberg or Chris Nolan. So right now, at the ripe old age of 73, I like to describe myself as the ultimate cheerleader of the group. Whatever I can do to support Todd Phillips with his genius Joker Folie à Deux coming out October 4th, whatever I can do to support any of the filmmakers who have a vision of Batman and what he should be and what the character should be, that is my prominent job, and I revel in it. I revel in it.
Michael, Streetman Nat here. I have a question. I don't know the facts behind this question, so if it's wrong, please correct me. But I grew up in Indiana. I grew up in southern Indiana, and I know you went to school at IU. And we always heard this urban legend that FedEx was a business proposal in a business class, and they got like a C minus, and they said it would never work. That the UPS and the United States Postal Service and UPS were dominant, and they'd never get off the ground. They would get crushed by the bigger shipping industries. And so if were you around and ever heard any of those stories? Because it seems like the biggest person to occupy this airspace is you with Batman. And I've never heard your story. And that's terrible because from Southern Indiana, we should all know your story about Batman and your contribution to Indiana University.
Well, I really appreciate that. All I know about is my connection through Batman to IU. As of today, I have donated over 45,000 comic books, and memorabilia to the Lilly Library in Bloomington, which is the rare book library. It's kind of legacy work, which is important to me with Indiana. IU gave me my start. In the early 70s, they had an experimental curriculum that allowed undergrads to teach courses if they've never been taught before in college, if we had the backing of a department on campus. I got the backing of the folklore department and convinced them that comic book superheroes are modern-day mythology. Whether we call them King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table or the Avengers, it's still the same basic stories of hope and redemption, of great heroes battling the demons and dragons of their day. They allowed me to teach that for credit. It was the first accredited college course on comic books ever taught in the world, and that brought me international attention, brought me to the attention of Stan, to the attention of DC Comics, who hired me, and that gave me my start. And by my senior year at Indiana, I was writing Batman comics and Detective, and I was having my dreams come true since I've had since I was 8 years old. So Indiana, I owe you everything.
Wasn't The Shadow the first comic that you wrote a story about, which got you, I think, on the radar of the editor in charge of Batman at DC?
Yeah, it absolutely was. It was a lucky break. The editor of The Shadow had just been told he needed a script the next